Welcome back to One Winning Pod. We're going to talk about the preseason and the roster as we go into camp. The camp just started. We got to watch the camp from the stadium, and I think the coolest part about that was a laser and firework light show afterwards. But there were some things to glean from it. I think the big thing we want to talk about this episode is kind of the state of the division, but from a Ravens perspective. The players we added this year, the players that we gained in the draft, just like kind of a little overview and like where the surpluses are, where the shortages are, so to speak. And then when you're looking at from a roster construction, what spots are there really available in the team for these fringe players to make? And then like kind of identifying who these players are and what we'll be looking for.
Yeah, it's crazy that it's August already. It feels like Memorial Day weekend was just like 3 weeks ago, and here we are, beginning of August, and preseason starts next week for the Ravens, and all this is starting to come into focus. Stadium practice was a cool little peek that we were able to get into the current state of the team right now as they're going through training camp. A little hard to follow on the television broadcast, I felt. You probably gleaned a little bit more if you're able to go to the stadium itself. But I still think the Ravens production did a good job with what they were able to show. But yeah, I mean, I guess we'll start off at the quarterback position. It was great to see Lamar Jackson running around, looked very healthy. His movement looked like there was no issue with the ankle, which, I mean, we expected considering, that injury would have been healed by the playoffs if the Ravens were able to make it. But yeah, I mean, not much to really say about Lamar. It was encouraging. He looked like he's always looked.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only question this year really is whether the Ravens pick three quarterbacks. Very clear Lamar's going to be there. Huntley's going to be there. And the only question is there another quarterback in camp that's going to show enough for the Ravens to keep them? But to be honest, we'll get into the other position groups, but there's plenty of competition, especially among tight end and running back. Definitely a lot of question marks in terms of like building the roster. One of the more interesting ones for me is basically going to be figuring out who's going to be the third running back, or honestly, who could even be one or two, because Gus and JK are no locks to be on the week one roster. I think both of them are probably good candidates for the pup if the Ravens want to go that route, either one or both of them. And then at that point, it's really, it's Justice Hill healthy enough, because he also had a season-ending injury last year. And if not him, who else? We've got a couple of guys like Mike Davis and Corey Clement was the recent signing for the Ravens. And then a bunch of, training camp guys of people that we'll be seeing over the next couple of weeks. So I'm excited for this one just to see if there's any, any one of these guys that are kind of going to be one of the new undrafted kind of rookie free agent, late round signing for the Ravens, who could really show off in preseason, because it seems to happen almost every year that someone new is going to flash.
For sure. McCrary made a flash in the stadium practice. He made a really cool catch. So that's another guy, trying to get in on the action. Got Beatty that wants to get in on the action. And I think there's a lot of options here. Mike Davis could be a handshake, so he could get cut and then brought back. There's a lot of options with the running back, but I do think if they keep 3 or 4 on the active roster is something to keep an eye on. And we're not counting Ricard in that. We're counting it more as a tight end in this calculation.
Yeah, I would expect the Ravens to keep a lot of these guys. We've seen with Greg Roman in this offense the past 3 seasons, he loves his 3-headed rushing attack at the beginning of the season. So according to Dobbins, he's going to be ready for week 1. We'll see if the Ravens doctors agree with that or not. Obviously, Dobbins was not at the practice last night. But I think if you're looking at it right now, a backfield of Dobbins, Mike Davis, and either Tyler Beatty or Justice Hill being active on game day is what you're looking at for week 1. If these rumors that Gus's recovery is going slower than everyone else's is to be true. Davis is a power runner inside. Understandably, he was underwhelming with Atlanta last year, but, if if we have Dobbins back, then you really just need him as a goal line back and, short yardage here and there. And the addition of Corey Clement is an additional wrinkle as well. It seemed unnecessary to bring him in. Maybe he's just a training camp body, or maybe there's something that they're not seeing with Hill and Beatty that Clement can bring them, either from like a pass protection standpoint, route running, third down, something along those lines. So it's definitely one of the more intriguing position battles in camp, and could have a big impact on the season going forward, because with Dobbins, they're not going to want to overload him in the beginning of the season. He's coming back with this injury. Gus, we're still not sure when he's going to be back. So it's likely that a multiple of the core of Davis, Beatty, Hill, and Clement will have an important role in setting the tone for the Ravens' rushing offense at the beginning of the season.
I think another position battle that's going to be interesting to kind of see how it shakes out. We've kind of outlined just in terms of our sort of very, very rough draft 53-man rosters, that there will probably be around 5 wide receivers potentially, just because of the influx of tight ends that are probably going to be on the 53. So we have 5. Now the position group looks a little light. Obviously, Bateman's going to be there. Duvernay, Prochet, Wallace are definitely going to be the top 4. As far as the 5th, I'm sure a lot of fans out there are hoping that the Ravens are going to sign a free agent. I was definitely on the Julio Jones train until, he got signed by the Buccaneers. So that dream is crushed. But the Ravens could bring in another free agent. Will Fuller, famously still out there, still unsigned. He could be an option. Maybe the Ravens choose to sign him or someone else. Or we might be seeing one of these, late round training camp guys, like Benjamin Victor. He's been around for a few training camps. Jalen Moore's another name, has been around for a while. There's also, a couple of undrafted free agents that the Ravens brought in this year as well. Really for me, I really don't know who has the upper hand. I would have to think that, a free agent might come in, but at this point, not that many left. I'm not sure, who would be a good fit at this point, in terms of, someone who could coach up some of the younger guys, or, or would they be more of a contributor on game days? Certainly, we're kind of it seems like we're at the bottom of the barrel. But then again, the Ravens have shown and they feel adamant that they don't need to have a top tier free agent to bring in. But nevertheless, it's going to be interesting. There's a lot of options on the table.
Well, to be honest with you, I think if you look at the wide receiver room, we do see quite a bit of talent. And I think, signing a Fuller, for instance, who hasn't played a healthy season in a long time, hasn't looked great in the most recent times we've seen him. I don't know what that really does for you. So I'm not particularly crazy about him. He's probably the best person still out there. So if that is the best player that's still available, I don't want to touch Cole Beasley. I don't think it needs to be done. I think you'll end up seeing a mid-year trade, if anything, for a wide receiver. But I think they're going to roll with the guys they have and pick up one of these guys, maybe even 2, because even with the way that we have the roster laid out right now, 2 quarterbacks, 3 running backs, 5 wide receiver, 9 offensive linemen, and 5 tight ends, it leaves one more roster spot. So you could see a 6th wide receiver. You could see a 10th offensive lineman. You could see 4 running backs. There's a couple options here of how they'll probably spread it out. But I think somebody of the group of Slade Bolden, Shamir Briggs, Devon Williams, who had a couple good catches during the stadium practice, Mekhi Polk, who a lot of people are interested in. Somebody's going to step up. Somebody's going to become the clear number 5. Maybe it's their special teams contributions that help. And we'll see if they want to go with the 6. That could even be the free agent signing. So I think one of these guys is probably going to make the team. And then even if they trade, it might be the last spot.
I will say I did like what I saw out of Bridges and Polk. I think both of them. Did Bridges? I meant Bolden. Maybe Bridges had some good plays too. I don't know. You guys can fill me in. But
Bridges did have a good play. Yeah.
Yeah.
They both had plays. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, both Polk and Bolden did. Their route running looked crisp for what they are, undrafted rookies, and really good hands. I know Bolden in particular did make a contested catch at one point. I mean, contested in these practices is kind of loose anyway, but still, it looked good. I'll be interested to see what they look like when you actually put them in preseason action. Will these guys make some plays? Will they have a mastery of the plays? Show any sign that they could be someone that the Ravens should stash on practice squad and try and develop in a couple of years? It's always hard. I don't know if some people are able to do it, but it's hard to look at these guys in shorts and say like, oh man, yeah, that guy's definitely got a ton of untapped potential. It's just hard without the live defensive contact. But I will say, yeah, the young guys, young undrafted guys, most of them looked like they have some potential, and we'll just have to see what that is. So yeah, I think it would be great if one of these guys works out. But I do, getting back to the veteran wide receiver conversation, I agree with what Alex saying with Fuller. He's not that much of a guy who has a ton of experience. He has more experience than the rest of the guys here, but I would, I know that this is an unpopular opinion among Ravens fans, but I would not be opposed to the Ravens bringing in a T.Y. Hilton or an Emmanuel Sanders as kind of like a coach on the field. For me, like, I don't expect you're going to get a ton out of those guys from a statistical standpoint if either of them signed. I don't think either of them is a game changer as far as, having any defensive coordinator giving them sleepless nights, having to game plan for those guys at that age. But, we saw with Josh Bynes last year how that helped Patrick Queen and some of the other younger linebackers on this defense. And I mean, we'll get to linebackers later on in this episode, not to jump ahead, but you even saw during the practice, Bynes pulling guys aside and talking them through things. I think that it would be good to have a veteran presence in the receiver room. This receiving room is incredibly young. Devin Duvernay and James Prochet are the old guards, and they're going into year 3. Is it really that big of a difference? I don't know, but I think, it's something that the Ravens will certainly consider. But, I think having a veteran presence in the room that is that young could have a big impact on this unit, even if that's not someone who's going to have a huge statistical impact on game day.
I'd be curious if the Ravens were interested in bringing back Willie Snead. He's got familiarity with the offense. I know you're definitely a Lamar fan. Maybe not as much of a Greg Roman fan, but I think I don't know. I mean, I think if the Ravens were interested in a vet that was going to, transform the offense, they would have got one already. I agree with that. I mean, if you guys recall, I think we talked about this months ago. Will Fuller, definitely not on my radar. Not my guy at all. So if I were the Ravens, I would not bring him in. But I don't know. I feel like I'd feel more comfortable with a guy like T.Y. or Snead over a guy like, Bolden or Polk. In those situations. I mean, we'll have to see. The Ravens have a mold of wide receiver that they like. I know a guy like Bolden reminds me a lot of Michael Campanaro. Like, not saying he's a bad player. He could be a good player. But it's just not a positional type that the Ravens typically go for or have much success here. And so, I mean, when you're talking like, somebody undrafted in that position, I feel like it's a lot to ask for them to kind of like make the roster and contribute. But yeah, I don't know. It's definitely something. The Ravens do this almost every year, man. It's just with whatever position group is that they always bring in someone. Everyone's going into training camp, preseason. Everyone's like, oh, we got the 53 locked down. Everything's good to go. And then the last minute they bring in somebody, or they make some like crazy signing that nobody ever expected. Totally ruins it. I fully expect like wide receiver to that's a high probability for me this year.
Well, next position group was certainly one that was pretty exciting at the stadium practice. We got to see plenty of Mark Andrews. The Lamar Jackson to Mark Andrews connection is alive and well, certainly. But a guy a lot of people were talking about, we got to see a lot of Isaiah Likely. The Ravens were lining him up in quite a lot of different positions. They were giving him a lot of opportunities to make catches at the practice. Certainly very exciting to see our first glimpse of what this guy may look like in the offense, and it's looking like it's what we were sold, at least right now. The Ravens are going to line him up in a lot of different situations, really try and take advantage of his athleticism. And, if this is a precursor to things to come, it's really going to help take some of the load off this wide receiver unit if he can really come in here and be an effective receiving option early in the season and for the year.
It's great to see one of my pre-draft darlings, probably the number one guy that I kind of had circled for a quality of player to round cost perspective. He was one of my favorites. We saw how he's been pretty effective out of like the halfback position and getting open and making plays out of that kind of part of the formation. Definitely want to see him under live fire. It's all fun and games in 7-on-7 drills or non-contact. I want to see him, have to worry about being tackled, because a couple of the catches that he did, he would have been like broken into two parts if people could tackle. So, we'll see how much body sacrificing he's doing come preseason.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like that take that I had a couple months ago is really turned sour over the last couple of weeks. Likely's really just blown up. Definitely somebody to watch for sure. I agree with you though, Alec. At the end of the day, I feel like it's always exciting for the fan base to kind of latch onto players that look really good in training camp, and I want to see that translate over for Likely. I want to see in the beginning of the season, is he going to be able to make a contribution? Until that happens, I'm still skeptical. But I do admit fully that I think it's more likely now than it was. The puns just keep coming. It's more. I think Likely is more likely to make a good impact now than he was probably when I first made that take. But yeah, certainly. I mean, I think the good thing about the Ravens double dipping at the tight end position in this draft, really, I think, opened up a lot of flexibility for the Ravens. I mean, we just talked about, like, we don't know who the fifth wide receiver is going to be for the Ravens. If Kohler and Likely are both healthy, I know Kohler had I can't remember what injury that he had. Is it a hernia or something? Hernia, yeah. If he comes back healthy for the regular season, and Likely continues to be healthy, I mean, they're both legit receiving options at the tight end group who can come in and do a lot of things that some of these late round wide receivers can probably do. But they have more positional versatility, like we talked about with Coach a couple of weeks ago. So, from a roster building perspective, I mean, that's pretty cool. I definitely think, that could help out a lot. And it's what Greg Roman likes to do, for better or worse. So, I think there's definitely a place for both those guys. I mean, all those guys on the team. The big thing for me is just, can they contribute, both in the run and pass game. I think that'll definitely help their chances to get a lot more playing time, to have that versatility.
Now, from a perspective of like Josh Oliver or Poljan, do we think that they could make the team? Do you think they would want to use that extra roster spot for one of those kind of players? Or do we think, if Kolar gets IR for the whole year, which I don't anticipate, but I think there is a non-zero chance that happens, if they feel really confident about one of those guys, do you think that makes sense?
Yeah, the Kolar injury, my initial guess, I shouldn't say guess, my initial reaction to Kolar, the injury news, was that, oh, wow, actually Josh Oliver has a place on this team, possibly, at least to start the season. But I don't know, if they feel good about Boyle's health and they like what they see out of Likely in the preseason, you've got Ricard there as essentially a guy you can fill in as your fourth tight end. Sure, he's mainly going to be doing blocking, but again, like we said, Likely was drafted to be a receiver, and Oliver, while he certainly has tools that could turn him into a decent receiving option, hasn't put that together yet at the NFL level. I would still think, even with the Kolar injury, he's very firmly on the bubble and a lower priority, as the Ravens would see. But we'll see what happens as camp goes along.
Yeah, I feel like he'd have to have a really good camp for the Ravens to consider bringing him on. I mean, he did come on as a run blocker late last year, especially in the Steelers game at the end of the season. He had some pretty good blocks on that game. But yeah, I feel like he'd have to really flash, particularly in the pass game, I think.
Yeah, I think we have to see some flashes that are quite surprising for either of those players to make the team if health holds up. So definitely want to see if there's anything there. I was talking with Ken about it. I think Poljan's the kind of player that could definitely sneak onto our practice squad and probably won't gain too much attention. Whereas I could see Josh Oliver with his draft capital expenditure and some of his other traits being a tight end that might be more desirable for some other team to pick up and add to their team, particularly if they have some injuries. So we'll see how that shakes out. Really unfortunate that Kolar didn't start the year on the PUP because now if he were to, he can't go into the season on the PUP and not count against the 53. They would have to play a game and use one of their handshakes to keep him on the team. And we have about maybe 3 handshakes that we could do, but not too many of those to give up.
Yeah, I mean, the Ravens wouldn't, dream of giving out so many handshakes like Paul Hollywood. You can't dilute the handshake. Otherwise, it's not special anymore. No Great British Baking Soda fans here? All right.
Oh, that's the guy's name. I
All right, let's move on. This isn't a baking podcast.
But he doesn't give out the handshake often, does he?
He has in later seasons. Spoiler
Gotcha.
alert.
It's a show that I watch every now and again if I walk in the room when Alice is watching it. She might be watching it right now, actually. It's a common go-to for her while we're doing pod. Anyways. Now, my biggest problem with watching food shows in general, side tangent, is just the problem is the food looks so good on camera. So I just want to eat it, but I can't eat it. I'm just trapped in some dimension where I'm locked out of eating good food. That's my biggest problem with food television. But
I think that's everyone's biggest problem with food television.
Then why do they show it? It's just taunt. It's torture. Why you torture me with food I can't eat?
It's supposed to inspire you. You see food.
I get inspired to eat the food, and then I can't.
It's supposed to inspire you to make the food. Get your creative juices flowing.
I think the best ones to watch, Peter, is the ones where they have these crazy chefs do crazy things, they're Michelin star chefs all competing, because they allow the level of effort and the techniques that they use are things that the home cook could really not do. So you won't feel that inspiration. And sometimes even though it looks good, you're I don't know, I can pass. But it's the really achievable home cooking stuff where you're yeah, I could totally do that right now. That's the one that gets me hungry.
Noted for future cooking shows. Choices.
So, speaking of eating, the offensive line loves to eat. And that's another place.
Low joke.
Boo.
Bro, they have to eat so much to stay that big and that strong. They work out so much.
They do. Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
We've talked about Joe Thomas's eating schedule before on this show. Very interesting article if you stumble across it.
That's when Bozeman got food poisoning before the game and couldn't play. He ate a whole pizza by himself. And that sounds like a lot to most humans, but the Ravens training staff didn't really blink an eye. It's yep, that right. Sounds about right. Yep.
It's like us eating an apple before we go out on a jog,
But anyways, we have a lot of players there. This is definitely a place that maybe the Ravens want to use the extra roster spot and hold a 10th offensive lineman. But, you got Ronnie Stanley, who's looking like he's probably going to be good to go for the season, but is kind of in bubble wrap right now. You got McCary, Phillips, Ben Powers, Linderbaum, Zeitler, Ben Cleveland, if he ever passes the conditioning test.
He passed it today. Check the notes.
Oh, dang. He passed it today. Congratulations.
Right, he got a certificate
Ben.
and everything.
Yeah, he went to the front of class. I did it, guys.
He even got a tweet from EDC Burner. Come on, man.
I'm a little behind on Twitter today, clearly. I'm sorry. It's been a busy day.
Well, okay, for this, it's literally in the notes right here. I think Chris put it in here for you with a smiley face.
I don't even see it. Where is this? Like,
Did he
legitimately,
delete it?
I legitimately
Oh,
do
it must
not
have been
see
deleted.
It. Yeah.
It was in the notes. I don't know where it went. Oh, it's on the bottom. It's on the bottom section. Public practice notes.
Wait. Oh, come on, man. I put the public practice notes in from my show with Ken. All right, I'm re-recording all this.
No, keep it in. Keep it in.
It'll be at the end. This will be at the end. This is
the rails. Off the rails.
I'll put it at the end. But damn it, guys. This is how you screw me up. I don't have to look at my own notes. I fucking wrote them.
I wrote the fucking notes. But yeah, offensive line. This one's certainly interesting. I mean, shoot, man, there's like a dozen people here that I think have a legitimate shot of getting playing time this season. I mean, we have 8 guys here who are probably locked in as starters, but honestly, I mean, the other 3 that we don't have, so Falele, he's a draft pick. I don't think the Ravens are going to give up on him this quickly. Juwan James, I do think he's a little bit of a stretch. It was more of an insurance policy for this year and next year. With the signing of Morgan Moses, doesn't seem like we need to have James healthy this year. And then Tristan Castillo played well in a few spots at center last year. He'd be a good backup option as well. I know a few people have probably thrown this around, though. Someone like Powers or Cleveland might not be bad from like a trade candidate perspective. Those guys don't have as much positional versatility as guys like McCary or Phillips. I believe Cole Jackson, I think, has mentioned something about this, probably with Powers. But, for me, that I don't know. Like, I would rather, I feel like personally I'd rather have, Falele and then maybe like Castillo's like the 10th lineman if we wanted to go 10 linemen. And maybe get rid of some, a guy like Powers or Cleveland just because of the positional versatility. But yeah, this is another position group I think that we're going to have to take a close look at in preseason to see how are people playing, and kind of see more about how this position group shakes out.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could definitely see either Cleveland or Powers being a trade candidate. I mean, just like they did with Brederson last year, you've got a little bit of some depth there, and could trade there and get some additional depth as well. But yeah, it's certainly a lot of guys here, and I'll say this though. I mean, I think it was interesting to see that we didn't see McCary or even Falele or Moses, even though that would have been way less likely, line up at left tackle at all during the camp, which leads me to believe that the Ravens are feeling confident about Stanley's progression at this time this year. I'll just say, though, after last year, I'm not going to feel comfortable with that until I see him on a football field in real game action, looking like at least Ronnie Stanley 2019 light. Because, last year was just such a out of left field. We weren't expecting him to be in the condition that he was, so we're still holding our breath on that. But, I'm inferring from what the lineups that we saw, personal agreements we saw with the offensive line, that the Ravens are comfortable with where Stanley is, but I still think we have to wait and see there. Another interesting part about the training camp, though, was we got to see our first action of Tyler Linderbaum. It's not that we saw a ton from the original positional groups, but now as we go down the list, we're getting into it's even with each positional group, it's harder to gauge terribly much from what we saw, especially given the nature of these practices are with them being non-contact. But I think that the early signs we've seen from Linderbaum, I didn't see any snaps that looked off target. It's possible that he did, and I just missed them. He looked comfortable out there. I don't really know what more else to say about that, but we got to see our first action from him.
Yeah, I think we'll have to see him in other kind of action to really say much more. But I will say, Falele, when I watched him at the practice, I thought he looked a little slow out of his stance. and I thought maybe I didn't have as much confidence in him as a starter right away. So like, if injury happened. On the other hand, Juwan James, he was the starting left tackle in the absence of Stanley in that practice, and I think that's where he's getting a majority of his practice reps. So I think if I had to guess, the Ravens are going to probably keep 10 offensive linemen. That's going to be the extra person. They will keep Falele and they will keep James. And that's assuming they don't trade Powers. But I do think there's a good chance that they try to trade a guy like Powers, just given his cap hit of about $2 million. And the other thing is, James, there is also a cap savings too if they cut him of $3 million. So there are options there. But after the Ravens restructured Marlon Humphrey and cleared up another $7 million, they're not really in that much pressure to make more cap space. Like, even if they did a trade for a player, they could restructure the contract. If they sign Lamar, that'll open up some cap space most likely. So there's a couple other levers they could pull for cap space. And Marcus Peters too is an option too. So there's a lot of things they could do for cap space. So I don't think getting rid of one of those players for cap space purposes will be the number one driving factor. So now if you look at the defense, it's a little bit more interesting in a way than the offense as far as how do you divvy up the amount of players, because there's a lot of positionless football that goes on defense. But in the general terms, you have defensive line, linebackers, edge rushers, and defensive backs. That's kind of how we categorized it. From a defensive line perspective, typically they carry 5. 4 people look pretty solid in Campbell, Pierce, Jones, and Matabuke. So Urban is a handshake deal candidate, so maybe he's not the automatic 5th. You have Washington, Mack, Crawford, and McKenzie, who offers the positional versatility to be named an offensive lineman, but really be playing defensive line. So what do you guys think? How do you think this part might shake out? Do you think you're going to have to see a huge performance out of a guy like Washington or Mack for them to make the team?
If you would have asked me before they signed Urban, I would have thought that was Washington's job already. I know, maybe in general, Matabuke and Washington have been maybe a little underwhelming, but honestly, I've seen some good flashes from both those guys. Washington in particular, I remember being pretty surprised early last season at how well he was playing. I'm not too sure why the Ravens wanted to bring back Urban in the first place. It didn't seem like a signing that was absolutely necessary, so I don't know if necessarily Urban is a lock. But I will say, Washington would probably be my guy before Urban. I could see them bringing back both. I think, we'll get to it in a second, but I think with defense, there are a few more pup candidates here that are a little bit more realistic. And so I could see the Ravens maybe for the 53 bringing on 6 defensive linemen. And then by, week 6, week 7, they'll have to make a decision of whether to keep one of those guys in favor of one of the outside linebackers.
Yeah, I think Chris brings up a good point. To me, it seems like the 5th spot is between Urban and Washington. Washington is obviously younger. Urban, it's great to bring another old vet back. It's similar to what the Ravens have already done with guys like Pernell McPhee and, Michael Pierce this year. But, he's 31. How much more does he really have in the tank, and how much more of a ceiling does he have at this point in his NFL career? He was a great role player for the Ravens when he was here, but honestly, a guy who's very replaceable. So I'd imagine that the Ravens brought him in just in the case that Washington or one of these other younger guys, they're not ready to go with them. As this is a team with Super Bowl aspirations, so then you can fall back to this vet guy who you already know what he can do. I don't know if that's what the Ravens are doing. I'm just postulating here, but yeah, I mean, for me, just because Washington has youth on his side, and like Chris said, we've seen some plays out of this guy. There is potential there. There needs to be more consistency. I'd like to see Washington get that spot, but the signing of Urban does make you question how much faith does the coaching staff have in that at this point.
Well, moving on to linebackers, I think we have 4 guys sort of penciled in already. Same 4 as last year: Queen, Bynes, Harrison, and Welch. I think the biggest question mark here is, One of those guys in the end, Harrison Welch, and there's a little bit more competition this year from some guys like Kobe McLean and what was it, the guy from Navy as well. There maybe could be a little bit of movement at some of the ends at the bottom. I think the biggest thing is for these guys to make it at the linebacker spot. Special teams, obviously, I think is number one. Harrison and Welch provide a lot, special teams. So anybody who does take that spot has to be able to contribute there. But the Ravens have also they've decided that we're still waiting on Queen to kind of take that next step. And it's I think it's still a little early to kind of give up on him. I know he doesn't play special teams like some of the other guys, but it's still way too early to kind of give up on him. So he's definitely a lock in my eyes. So I think the biggest thing come preseason is just who else can step up in against the 2s and 3s, who can play well on special teams, and then we'll see if they might have a shot at supplanting one of Harrison or Welch.
I feel like this is the prime spot for the Ravens to have an undrafted free agent make the team, which is no surprise because this is like the spot that the Ravens have done this in the past. You got Kobe McLean, Diogo Fagot, and Josh Ross all fighting for it. And I think the first two names there have the best chance of making some impact and in the preseason and fighting for a roster spot. Now, for them to get it over Christian Welch would be somewhat interesting, just because of his special teams prowess and the fact that CoCap's no longer on the team. We might be looking at Welch as that leader. But I'm definitely keeping a very close eye on these players because I think they have the best shot.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and you're talking about Welch right there. He was an undrafted guy, and we've seen he's a third-year player. Yeah, the Ravens like to keep these guys around. Could certainly see one of them being a practice squad stash, but yeah, I do think you bring up an interesting point there that I hadn't exactly thought about. But yes, with the retirement of Anthony Levine, and with special teams being such a big thing for Coach Harbaugh, I think that it's Welch's job to lose. I think he has a role on this team right there for him if he wants to, grab it and take it. So I'd imagine that he has an inside shot there. But like we're saying, the Ravens, they put a lot of stock into these guys that they grab post-draft. So, if for whatever reason it seems like he's not going to be the guy, or they can get more out of one of these guys, I don't think they'll hesitate to do that.
I guess one question I have is, do you think the Ravens sneak an extra inside linebacker onto the roster and utilize the pup for one of these edge players so that they can fit them in and then figure it out later?
I mean, it's certainly a move they could do. Do we know Bowser's timetable at the moment?
It's hard to say. I mean, they're keeping it very tight-lipped. I think he could
That's
be
what
available
I thought, yeah.
week 1, but it's a level of availability. We saw what it looked like when Akers came back on a very rushed timeline. Like, he certainly can play. He can probably play at a higher level than a guy like Beagle, perhaps. But is he going to be so good right out of the jump? Or are you hurting his long-term season prospects by starting him sooner? These are questions for the doctors, not for us to decide. But I don't know. I mean, Ajabo almost for certain will not be available because he got injured many months later. So Ajabo feels like a definite pup, carry through.
Yeah, that one's so much of a guarantee. It's easy to forget.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like if it's just Ajabo, there might be a chance for that. Maybe extra inside linebacker to make the team. If it's both of them, I think it's got to be another inside linebacker and probably another defensive lineman. Because with those two guys, like if you consider them on the pup, the position group is definitely a lot lighter. I mean, you had up until a couple of weeks ago, you only really had Owe and Hayes. That was it, and a few camp bodies. We did re-sign Justin Houston, so I think he kind of slots in there as well. So you have Owe, Houston, Hayes. Alec, you mentioned him, Vince Beagle. I think he was from Miami, I believe. We signed him from there. He could be a guy who, I think could be, a stand-in for, Bowser or Jabo, at least for a couple of weeks. I feel like the Ravens would be in a bad place if they had to rely on him long-term. I do think those guys will definitely be here for the good portion of the season as long as their health continues to progress. Moving on to DBs, this is definitely one of the heaviest position groups. I think we had 10 outlined here. A lot of guys here. I think just a lot of excitement in general for a lot of these young players. Kyle Hamilton for sure. Marcus Williams. I'd love to see him in some preseason game action as a Raven. It'll be great. And then we have some of the young rookies at cornerback. Armour Davis and Pepe. Some of these guys would love to be able to kind of see them and kind of how the things shake out in terms of depth chart. And then as well, Marlowe and Marcus Peters, just kind of where their health is at. Marlowe, I think from what we saw at the practice, I think he's probably good to go. I don't remember if we saw Peters there. I assume that we didn't actually. But yeah, I mean, there's a couple of question marks, but honestly, I think I'm really excited for this group and just really want to see him in game action.
Yeah, I believe we are still waiting for Peters come back. I think he was held out along with Dobbins and Stanley, but yeah, I agree. It's funny how Twitters are such a funny thing. We're getting insight into practices that we would have never, just even 15 years ago, we would never have gotten this level of access that we have to players to see the rookies come in and do their thing. And Kyle Hamilton got burnt in a drill by an undrafted guy whose name is escaping me at the moment. And of course, reactionaries on Twitter just saw that play and said, "Oh, Kyle Hamilton's a bust. Why did the Ravens draft him?" But Hamilton has had a good camp from all things that we've heard. It's going to be really exciting to see him and see what he does to develop. A small thing that I saw during camp doesn't terribly mean much, but it was good to see. There was a slant Andrews ran in front of Marlon, and Marlon went out and just punched the football out of Mark Andrews' hands. And we didn't see much fruit punch last year. That was something that whether it be because of Marlon had to change how he was playing because of injuries or what, that was something missing from Marlon's game last year. So to see him at least working on it there in camp was a good sign. But this group is deep. You saw some good plays even in this non-contact practice. But yeah, this is a good deep group that there's a lot of hope for, that they'll come back healthy and be much better than last season.
Yeah, unfortunately, Ardarius Washington has a foot injury, so I'm not sure when we'll see more of him, and he's definitely one of those fringe players I wanted to get a closer look at. With the guys like Geno Stone, Brandon Stevens, Tony Jefferson, and the signing of Kyle Fuller is making it harder and harder for these players to stand out. Now, I will say, David Vereen was a guy that I noticed during the stadium practice, and I want to keep a close eye on. I could see him making the practice squad if he doesn't turn too many heads in preseason like he turned mine. He definitely seemed like he might be a quality player, so keep an eye out for him. But yeah, this is the one place where you look at it, really loaded part of the roster. I don't think we'll need Kayvon Seymour's services or Robert Jackson's. I think we'll satisfy it with many of the guys we talked about earlier. Well, I think after this episode, we're all ready for next week's preseason game on Thursday against the Titans at the Bank. Really excited to go and see how all these players play. As a bit of a programming note, if you're still following the Ravens recap feed and have been enjoying all these episodes, cool, but it's now time to switch over to One Winning Pod. Definitely, that's the place to catch us longest term. Also, if you haven't checked it out yet, now's a really good time to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also find it by searching One Winning Pod and looking in the show notes for the link. Right now, it's just the episodes that we're recording, but during the season, we're going to at least start doing games against the spread betting show and just quick content, maybe 5-10 minute shows that don't really fit our normal format. It might be just one or two of us talking, just get ideas out there. So definitely give that a follow. And yeah, we can't wait. Preseason's back, football is back, actual 11-11 contact is coming. Can't wait. Go Ravens.